Maia Ramsden, welcome back to the Running Effect podcast. Third time's the charm, as I said a minute ago before hitting the record button. I loved my first two conversations with you, and such a joy and privilege to have you back on. So how are you doing this afternoon?
Hey, Dominic, I'm good. Thanks so much for having me back.
First question off the top of my head. Today is regionals. So what are the biggest memories from regionals? And do you have a little bit of FOMO being out of the cross country world?
Oh my gosh. First of all, massive FOMO. I've been texting my team all week. Looks like our men have an auto bid. Congrats to them. And the women at this point, I'm doing the calculations. When this is released, I'm assuming we'll know for sure. It looks like right now they're going to sneak in, which is just I can't even describe how happy that makes me. Regionals is just, we had ups and downs there. My sophomore year, we won. And that was probably top 5 moment of my college career. We were on our home course at Franklin Park. We were not supposed to win. We hadn't been ranked high enough to win. And we didn't have any, I would say, outstanding performances. All of our women just ran so well. That was really one of my favorite memories of college. And then the year after that was pretty disappointing. We didn't make it. And then last year we did. And yeah, it's just, there's nothing quite like it. I sent a message to the girls saying, just make sure you're having fun, because once you graduate, it's done forever.
Speaking to that point, most of the people on the podcast that I talk to when we bring up NCAA cross country or high school cross country, but specifically NCAA, they say there are no 4 years like it, or 5 years for some people. It's like the most special time of their life. And I know a lot of them miss it. But on the other hand, most of the people listening to our conversation today probably are not NCAA Division I athletes or haven't been. How would you describe the experience of being on a cross country team in college?
Yeah, I think this might feel separate for a second, but it'll circle back. Recently we were doing some sort of career development workshops, and talking about what transferable skills running, in this case professionally, but I think it applies even more so to college teams, running brings. And I think really the thing about cross country that makes it so difficult but then amazing when it clicks is that you have to navigate 7+ people with different, not just sort of physical situations with the sport, but mental outlooks, goals, hopes and dreams. And somehow you have to get those 7 people on the same page to have the same goal and the same dream. And that is way harder than I think it sounds. Because you'd think it's simple, right? Okay, our goal is to make the national meet or win our conference or whatever. But when you actually break it down to think, okay, this is our big dream. How do we make sure everyone wants it and wants it the same, or at least wants it enough to buy in? That's what makes it really difficult. And I mean, at least talking to my own experience, we didn't always get that right. Some years it felt like everybody was really on the same page, and others it didn't. But I think that when you do get it right and everybody is going for the same thing, you stand on that line and it's just the best feeling. When the gun goes, you're all running towards the same thing, and it's really, yeah, I don't know that I'm doing a great job explaining it, but it really is a special feeling.
I'm trying to pull up a quote, and here's the fun part when you think you remember a quote, but you don't remember it fully to reiterate it. So I'm going in my notes app and I remember part of it, so I search part of it. And I don't know if I'm going to find it in time. I'll come back to it some other time. But it was actually a quote from the podcast, and I'll try my best to summarize it. And the guest ran for Stanford, and he was saying, sometimes the ordinary moments in hindsight are actually the extraordinary moments. It's not the extraordinary moments we look back on with great fondness. A lot of times it's the moments of eating a bagel with a teammate after practice. I feel like I say bagel wrong. People always get at me for that, so I'm self-aware. But besides the point, it's those ordinary moments that or times on the bus going to a meet or the pre-meet dinner or whatever it might be. For you, when you think back to your years at Harvard, what are some of the insignificant moments that now that you're removed from the NCAA are actually hold some of the most meaning and fondness and special memories?
Oh yeah, that quote really holds true for me as well, I think. I don't know, I saw some of my teammates posting recently. It was like their last workout at this place called Elm Bank that we go, and it's like 25 minutes away on a good day, and then when you hit rush hour traffic on the way back, it's more like 45 to an hour. But yeah, I just think fall in the Northeast is really pretty. So I just think, like, if I close my eyes and like cross country, it's like being at Elm Bank, having just done something pretty hard. Like, usually our workouts there ended with a fast, I don't know, 800 or something. Cooling down, laughing, the leaves are pretty, it's kind of chilly out, having a yogurt in the van back and someone blasting like a song that we all know. And like that, I think, probably happened every week. And you just don't appreciate it while you're there. You kind of, in fact, often I think I dreaded it a little bit because the workout was going to be really hard. But now, yeah, I would love to go back for just a few more times. It's so fun.
As someone who placed 10th at the national meet on the grass last year, you clearly have that X factor. What would you say to athletes who are listening today? This podcast will definitely come out before the national meet in terms of getting it done on the day, or it could be a athlete listening who's got a big marathon coming up, or a high school athlete who's got regionals or nationals coming up. What would you say in terms of getting it done on the day, specifically when I think there's a lot of built up innate pressure? Like, the best of the best NCAA athletes have been training really hard since June, July. The best high school athletes the same. And it all builds up to this one, like, depending on the gender, like, 18 to 30-minute race, basically. Like, your whole 4 months of training. What would you say in terms of like getting it done on the day?
Yeah, I honestly think a lot of it is like forgetting all of that. It's funny, like I think that one of the performances I'm like most proud of is actually the year before that, the year before last year, because I just had no expectations and I ran like it. Like I had come like 120th the year before or something like that. I'm not actually sure, but I was like, okay, like I have nothing to prove this time around. Like, I knew I was going to improve upon my spot from the year before because of where my fitness was. And then last year, yeah, I think I didn't do as good a job as I could have of shutting out those expectations. But really, I think it's a conscious and very intentional sort of mental activity to shut out that noise and say, you're standing on the start line to run 6 kilometers the same way you did at regionals the week before, and the same way you did at conference, and the same way you did at that random invite in September. Like, it actually doesn't change that much. And I think typically the people who have the best race on that day are the ones that can forget about like the fanfare and the it's fun. It's like forgetting about what makes nationals special, just for that 20 odd minute block. Yeah. And then you can remember again because it's really cool. But yeah, I think it's a lot about that. And I don't know, journaling really helped me. Like, I was looking back on some journal entries from regionals this week, actually, just when I was thinking about what energy to channel for the girls from afar. So yeah.
How would you say an athlete out there should balance the mix of, as a high achieving athlete, which is the type of person who listens to a podcast like this, they have expectations for themselves. Like, they set goals, they set dreams probably at the beginning of the season. It's what motivates them and drives them during those really hard workouts. But also, like you said, and I think there's a lot of truth there, specifically when I've talked to like mental performance counselors, they all say very similar things of like, yeah, if you think that basically my question before of like, you've worked 4 months for this, it's all leading up to this, like, it's probably going to backfire on you because if you make the race in the moment bigger than it actually is, I don't think you're necessarily staying true to the intent and the best intentions, and it can blow up and backfire. And if your goal is winning nationals and 2 miles in, you realize that's not happening, like, things can very quickly unfold. So all that rambling aside, the quick question here is, how do you balance having expectations for yourself as a high quality athlete while also, as you just shared, like running free and running loose, and what's the balance and dance between those two?
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of thoughts. I feel like first, I'm definitely still trying to figure it out. I think something I struggled with over the summer and like I'm figuring out for this transition to the next step of my career is how to be quite specific about my goals, and like be willing to be vulnerable and have sort of big goals. And I think, there's sort of these outcome goals and process goals, and to be honest, and this could be a hot take, I think that saying for our sport, like, don't have any outcome goals is silly. Like, we're a sport very much driven on outcome. And I think that actually often it can do more harm to completely ignore those outcome goals. Because sometimes, and in my experience at least, what sometimes happens then is the process is going well, you focus so much on the process, and then there's room to reach higher than whatever internal expectation you had for yourself, but you don't have the goal and you haven't done the vision, like the work to envision what that next step looks like, and then you don't know what to do. Like, it's like if you think you're just gonna, like, you haven't even thought about making the meet, so then when you make the meet you're so surprised that you don't have any goals there, and then you just run like a mediocre race. And that's happened, I feel like, a lot during my college career, especially in the early days, where like I didn't want to say my goal is to make the meet because that's an outcome goal, and if it doesn't happen I'm going to be devastated. But then if I did make the meet, I was so shocked that I didn't sort of have a plan in place to do well once I got there. So I do think you have to have some outcome goals. I'm not saying you should be driven by the outcome, and now I'm going to contradict myself, because I think you need to have those goals, especially early on in the season, and especially like when you're getting into the rhythm and routine of training. But then I think when it comes to the day, my college coach used to say this, like, you just have to divorce the outcome. You just have to say, what's going to happen is going to happen. I have done my best to prepare for this. I'm going to run the race. I'll commit to the full 6 kilometers or 10 or whatever you're doing of the race. And to a certain extent, just let it go and let what happens happen. So yeah, I'm a big believer that you need both, like the process goals, and I do think you need a certain outcome goal. And I think what I'm working towards for myself right now is trying to be okay if that outcome doesn't happen. Like, I think rather than saying let's not focus on the outcome, say I have an ideal outcome in mind, and I am going to be sad and disappointed if it doesn't happen, but it's not going to break me. Like, that's part of the process, and I will just learn from it.
It's also probably, and feel free to share your thoughts here, the balance of viewing things in the long term, in terms of like, I'm sure the goal, we'll get into this, like, was to make the Olympics this year. But if you didn't make the Olympics this year, your career's not over. Like, yes, you can be sad about that, but it's viewing, or an athlete this week, if they don't perform at NCAAs how they would want to, like, there a lot of times there is next year, or there's a next goal to chase. Like you mentioned, you got like 120 at something, and then you knocked it out of the park the next year. But if you had the mindset of like, this race is the end all be all and it's going to make or break my career, like, that's never the case. A lot of times I think we have to get out of our head and realize that, as silly as it sounds, but it's true, running is quite a hilarious sport. Like, we're on a floating rock in space and we're doing this motion as fast as we can.
Yeah.
It's like really bizarre. If you frame it like that, it's like, go have fun, like, see what you can do and do your best on the day. And if it doesn't shape up, there's always next time.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like something Graham would say. And that is, I think, one of his superpowers, is to have that perspective of like, we are tiny little creatures on a floating dot. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also think like something that I'm still working on is just trying to have this more holistic view of a season or of a year or of a career. Like, it's never just about the one race, and to look at it from like a positive lens, in the sense, like, one of the things I value, and one of the things, like, when I think about other runners who I look up to, is consistency. And so that was a real mindset shift for me too. It's like, wow, rather than saying I'm going to be the very best at this one very specific kind of random race, I'm going to say I'm going to try and be the most consistent this season than I was than I ever have been before, or like I want to be more consistent than I was last year. And however that looks, right? Like I'm not saying I'm going to run the same time every time because things change, but it's like I want to have a consistent race execution. I want to have a consistent mental game before the race where I know I'm striking the right balance of nervous and excited, or like something like this where it's like, yeah, you can work on trying to make it steady across across the course of the season, over the course of the season. And that sometimes for me helped to take the pressure off a little bit of like the last one. I started working with a sports psych this past year, like calendar year, and that was huge. And I'm sharing his secrets, but one of the things he would say is like, you're going this big race and you're finishing a task. Like you are going to this race to finish something you started, in this case, something you started in the summer or something you started in September. It was a process. And this is just the end of that process, and it doesn't need to be anything more.
That's so good. That's so good. This is a deep question for you, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. And I do want to recap your unbelievably wild 2024. I was reviewing some of the numbers and my jaw dropped. I was just like, oh my gosh, wild some of the things you did. But you're now a rookie in your rookie season with the OAC, which we'll also get into. But in terms of, I feel like a lot of these conversations centered around a word that we haven't used yet, which is fulfillment. Because at the end of the day, a lot of times we want to accomplish things to feel more fulfilled. For you, in this next stage of life in your professional career, what do you feel like you would need to accomplish to feel fulfilled in the sport of running?
Yeah, that's a great question. My side note on that is that my mom, who is amazing and one of my just
shout out.
Yeah, shout out, Mom. I love you. But you know, something that she said once, and I think this is a Margot original, so that was huge because I was like, did you read this somewhere or just make that up? But I think she made it up. She was like, I was going through kind of a rough time, and she was like, you know, Maia, like people put a lot of emphasis and work really hard to figure out how to be happy. And she said to me, and it stuck with me, this was probably, I think this was my junior year, she said this to me, although could be wrong. She was like, I think that's overrated. She said, happiness is always going to come and go. But if you are fulfilled and if you have a purpose, that's going to keep you grounded a lot more than being happy. And so sort of shift your mindset and shift what you're striving for a little bit. And I agree with that a lot. I think about my senior year, for example, and I'm like, wow, was I happy all the time? No, like I was working my butt off, especially in the spring. Like I don't think I had a very fun senior spring in the conventional sense, but I was so fulfilled. I had big goals, and every day I was getting up ready to chase them. And that's what I think I will want for my professional career too. I think I have goals right now, and I'm excited every day to work towards them. And I do feel a deep sense of purpose. And I hope I can keep setting new goals to keep that feeling up. And I think probably when I don't feel that anymore is maybe it's time to shift focus and energy and do something else. Like life is long.
When you were talking there, it reminded me of a quote, and you were sharing the quote from your mom, the original there. And it reminded me of, I think, specifically me, but we as humans, I think a lot of times feel like we're always supposed to feel like excited and happy, using her word there. And this quote, I think, nails this really, really well. I want to get your take on it. The quote is, everything changed for me when I realized that we're not meant to feel excited and perfect all the time. I started accepting that where I am right now is genuinely where I'm meant to be. Tough days are all a part of the process. Lean into them. Bad days are also a part of a very good and meaningful life. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's exactly that. And it's just to say that if you have an underlying purpose or an underlying sense of fulfillment, you can ride out those bad days so much easier. You've got a touchstone to say, okay, this day is bad. When I get back to equilibrium, there's something else coming.
I like that. The quote I have underneath it, which I think kind of ties into this as well. It's normal to not know what you're doing. If you did, it wouldn't be called growth. High five your fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and carry on. I love that.
Yeah, I like the idea of high-fiving it too. It's like, don't give it too much power. Just say, yeah, it's a part of it. Let's move on.
How much have you, in your career, truly felt like you knew what you were doing, whether it was in high school, college, or now as a professional?
I'm going to go with the last 3 weeks of my senior year, and maybe that's it. And then it stopped.
That's
It was
so
like, okay.
refreshing to hear for
It
a
was
lot of
like,
people, I think, out there.
it was like I was ready to go. Okay, I was like, I know how to do this part. I can do the regionals. I can do nationals. But then I was thrown back into the unknown, like quite literally the day after. So yeah, I think it's like, and you relish the time when you do know what you're doing. It's fun. It's also scary because you know exactly what you need to do or not do to succeed. But yeah, but then it's gone again. It's fleeting.
So good to hear. Because I think something, Maya, that we do such a poor job in the sport, and it's something I'm trying to change with this podcast, is a high schooler out there thinks that them not knowing what they're doing is exclusive to them. And they look at your accomplishments now and they say, oh my gosh, she didn't know what she was doing when she won NCAAs or set a record or made the world championships or Olympic team or did X, Y, and Z. Oh, it's okay to not know what I'm doing. Like, because a lot of people want to get to where you are and they think that by these things, by them feeling these things, you haven't felt these things. And so they'll never get to where you are. And I think it's so refreshing. So I appreciate you sharing that because I think so many people feel alone when in reality, almost across the board, everyone experiences the same things at every level in the sport. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I think it ebbs and flows, right? And there's times when you feel a little more equipped. I think your first year anywhere is hard. Like we are referring to ourselves as the freshmen, and I feel like a first year in college all over again. Like I'm asking my older teammates questions that might be dumb, or like maybe I should know and I don't, or it feels that way anyway. And that's how it was in 2020 when I first started, and every year you learn a little more. And that's why I said it. I do think there are times, the great times when you're like, oh, I got it under control. And then just when you got it, something changes, and you don't have it anymore. And yeah, I think that's good for growth as well. Like every time you feel like you're comfortable or you know what you're doing, either life is going to change or you're going to find a new situation to put yourself in that's a new challenge, and then you feel completely lost all over again.
Such good thoughts there. Maya, I want to go back briefly before we put a pin in this conversation and move on to talking about your senior year. You talk to the girls on the team quite a bit, it seems. You're a really reflective person. You were talking about going back to journaling this time last year and sharing a lot of advice with friends and girls on the team. Coaching career, ? In the future. Is this something that has crossed your mind? It seems like you're doing some coaching from the other side of the country.
Oh, definitely not coaching as much as like, hey girl, how you doing?
It's a form of coaching though.
I don't know.
Informal.
There are so many different things I'd like to do that we'll see. It's not in my mind right now, but yeah, who knows?
In terms of the sport and your background, obviously having gone to Harvard, the Harvard degree has so much aura to it, as it should probably. How do you balance in terms of, and again, it's kind of interesting to ask you these questions because you're so new to the sport. I really shouldn't be asking them, but that's the purpose of the conversation, just going with the flow of it. Like, what's your perspective on staying in the sport versus out of the sport ultimately when you decide to hang up the spikes? Because not to throw shade at other universities, but like Harvard's legit. You get opportunities outside the sport that you would not get if you went to a regular college.
Yeah, I don't know. It is hard to. I've actually been thinking about that a lot this week because we've had some workshops and I've been like asked to do some thinking about the future, which I actually think is really good because it just reminds you once again that even though this sport and career can feel quite totalizing, it's not. And the reality is I'll be done with this probably around age 35, and then I'm gonna have a lot more years. So it is good, I think, for me and for everyone to just sort of think about what's next, not in a way to rush through it at all, but more to almost take some pressure off, so that you can enjoy this part. I don't know. I think it really comes down to like what you want to do. I feel so lucky that so many people in the sport, coaches, sports marketing people, people really doing amazing imaginative work of like how to make our sport better are former athletes. And in some ways I'm like, wow, that is so cool to think that you can make this a lifelong career if you want. Not necessarily as a competitor, but doing something else in the running space. For me personally, I don't know if that'll be my journey. I didn't think I was gonna keep running after college, but I loved it, and I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to keep going. And I was like, I don't know why I'd stop something that brings me so much joy. Um, and there are so many other things that I was doing while in college, that I want to give time to when I'm done, including like just going back to school. Like I really loved school, and I kind of said to myself after I was done with undergrad that I was going to give running its shot by itself, and then give some of my academic work its time in the spotlight. So I'm thinking right now I'll return to that, but that's like 10 plus years away. So, I'm saying this to you now, and in 8 years, I might have a very, very different perspective.
And that's the beauty of life, is evolving and changing, and yeah, focusing on the chapter you're in and not necessarily worrying about other chapters and being open to them changing. So I think you've got a great mindset there. I want to talk about your 2024 season. So, in my opinion, take from my words, you can disagree if you want to. You had one of the most dominant seasons, period, I think I've ever seen in the NCAA. And I just want to kind of take the listeners through it. So in February of 2024, you set a personal mile best of 4:24 in the Wannamaker Mile at the Millrose Games, which I also think was a Harvard record, if I'm not mistaken. And then you also qualified for the final of the women's 1500 at the 2024 World Athletics Indoor Championships in Scotland. And you ran a national indoor record time of 4:06, and finished 10th in the final. And then at the indoor NCAA track and field championship meet, which was like, I want to say a few days later, some crazy turnaround. You can speak to this. You set a new meet record. You didn't just win. You set a new meet record to win the mile in 4:25. And then shifting focus to outdoor season, May 18th at the LA Grand Prix, you broke the national 1500 meter record with 4:02. Then on June 8th, you went on to win an NCAA title in the women's 15, which made you go back to back. And that was the first woman in 20 years to win back to back NCAA Division I titles. I could go on and on and on. I literally didn't even mention that you made the Olympics, and almost made the final. What are your reactions as I read all of that? And there's so much more that I left out. We're talking big level stuff. I didn't even bring up conference or any of that. Like, could you have drawn it up any better?
Yeah, no, it was a dream year. I mean, bittersweet ending. Like I really wanted to make that final at the Olympics. But no, I was just so grateful that last I say last year, like I guess we're still in 2024, but I'm not in school anymore, so it feels like a new year. But like I just don't think it could have happened without my support system. Because I was really, I think I said it earlier, like I was locked in. I did not really socialize all that much. I relied a lot on my family, my coach, our other like Harvard coachings and medical staff, my roommates. They really got me through. My boyfriend, like I would say my roommates and my boyfriend, like the three of them really just listened to me the whole time, even when what I was saying was probably crazy, like what I wanted was crazy. And when I look back on that year, like I'm sometimes like I have no idea how I don't know how I was sleeping in between. I don't know how I got my schoolwork done. But it's because of all of those people. Like that's how I got it done. So yeah, it is crazy to look back on. It was a whirlwind.
I know in our 3 conversations that you care deeply about Harvard, the university, the team, the legacy of the program. I don't think it's a controversial to take to say you're the most decorated female in Harvard track and field cross country history. What does that mean to you to cement your legacy within the institution? And Also, I'm sure there are like a plethora of middle schoolers and high schoolers who you don't even know yet who are now looking to the school because of you and what you did there and thinking, oh, I could be like Maya one day there.
It's funny. I have a really vivid memory of being at my grandparents' when I was getting recruited. And I read an article, it must have been on a Harvard website, like our student newspaper or something, about Gabby Thomas. Um, and it was about, I think Gabby studied abroad, and she had just won her NCAA title, or maybe she was about to. I can't quite remember the contents of the article, just basically that its conclusion was that Gabby was doing it all. Like, she was doing school, she was really passionate about what she was studying overseas, she was also a NCAA national champion. And I read that, and I remember going to my parents and being like, look, guys, I can study abroad while I'm at school and also be a runner. And I feel grateful to her for having paved that for me. And I hope that that's what I have shown. Like, I do care about the program a lot. And, you know, I have not controversial, I have conflicted thoughts about Harvard as an institution, but my own experience there was really, it was special, and I learned so much, and I love my department and my professors and my mentors there. And I want people to know that you don't have to make hard choices between an athletic career and an academic one. Or like pick your pick your poison. Like, it doesn't have to be school. Maybe you love to sing or play an instrument or paint, or I don't know, just in the most high school musical way you can think of. You don't need to pick between being an athlete and having another something that you care about and are passionate about. And the Harvard program really allowed me the space for that. And I'm so grateful to that. And I think it goes both ways too. It's like, sometimes people think, oh, if you care about these other things, like, you don't have the time or energy or bandwidth to be a really, really high level athlete. And I hope that our program can show that that's not true. Yeah, you can do it all, friends.
The one thing I'd say off of that is the people, I think, and professionals have to navigate this. So maybe I'll ask this question next time I have you on after a little more seasoned as a professional. It's, if your whole life is running in the sport, it can self-destruct you, because
Yeah.
all you start to care about is your running. And going back earlier in our conversation to talking about races, then those become the end all be all because your whole life is running. And former podcast guest Brad Stolberg, he's written a few New York Times bestselling books. He described identity to me in a really beautiful way. He said we should view our identity like a house, and different rooms of a house have different purposes and meanings. And he goes, our identity is similar. So if one room catches on fire, you can go to the next room and maybe it'll get mended and you can go back. But if your whole house is just one room and it catches on fire, that's an attack on you as a person. And so I think in my experience with schools like Harvard or Stanford, or like the Air Force Academy recently, specifically the men's team has been really good over the years recently. It's like, I think the focus on extracurriculars and academics, and it almost like balances you out as a person and makes you approach your races and training from a more level-headed view. Obviously, there are examples of people who are like Jakob Ingebrigtsen, who all they care about is their running and they seem to do really well. But I would go so far as to say, you know, how much do you enjoy your life? I don't know.
No, Jakob is a musician as well. Lest
Is he
we forget.
really?
Yeah, their song, the
Oh,
Ingebrigtsen
this
song,
is true.
came out over the
This
summer.
is
I don't know.
true.
Our household plays it kind of a lot. It's kind of it's a fun bop. So he's got something else going on too. But
Very
yeah,
fair.
I think that's so true, and I love that house analogy. I and I think, like, I really think Harvard forces that on you, for better or worse. And so if you're the type of person that appreciates that or wants that sort of all these different interests anyway, that's great. And if you don't, you might struggle there. But that, like, the sort of, I don't know how to say this. Let's see. Having lots of different things going on, you can do that anywhere. It doesn't need to be at a specific school or place in the world. It's more just, it's an internal thing. And it's honestly, like, it's something I'm looking for right now, or in the process of figuring out how I'm going to do it. I had someone recently tell me also, like, not to get too numbers about it, because numbers aren't my thing anyway, but like if running right now takes up somewhere between 60 and 80% of my energy in a given day, 40% is a lot to do something else. And that's the same in college. So yeah, I just think people can't feel limited by it.
When I read off those accomplishments, and I'm sure you've gone through you're a super deep, insightful person. I'm sure you've gone through reflective processes. Which one, whether it's a race, a time, a title, the Olympics, like which specific race or achievement stands out to you as the most meaningful? If you could only have one.
If I could only have, that's so hard. Can I have two?
It's like, sure, you can have two. Why not? We'll be generous today, Maya. Why not? Two.
Okay. I think the first one was the heats of World Indoors. That was like one of the best days of my life. I submitted my senior thesis that day. And it was the first time I represented my country. And there's just nothing quite like that, I think. Like I put my uniform on, I put that black singlet on, and I was like, I might cry, but I was like, I can't cry because I have to race first. And then it went really well, and I ran a PB, and I made the final, and it was just this overwhelming emotion that day. So that's one. That was really a special day for me. Yeah. And then the other one in college, and I don't know if you mentioned this, but my favorite college memory, like top of my college list, is Penn relays. My team, like we didn't make the national meet by 0.01 seconds. We were 13th, ranked 13th, so we didn't get the chance to go. And we all were pretty gutted about that, I think. And we sort of, Penn wasn't on the schedule. It was the week before our conference, I want to say. So usually, sometimes the Ivy League schools don't do it because we have conference the next weekend. But we had a joint effort of Sophia and I, who had one coach, and then our Gibby, and then our sprint teammates had their coach, and we all sort of worked together to convince them. That's how it felt like. Maybe they have a different side of the story. To have another opportunity to run the DMR at Penn. And yeah, what an experience. That was really special.
Getting a deeper look in your head here, what's fascinating to me is neither of those answers were record-based or championship-based.
Yeah.
Take me through that process. Why those over things that I think people objectively...
Caveat... Oh, yeah, sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Hit me. No, go ahead.
No, I just want to say, I think I should caveat that in my head and my emotional landscape, the Olympics are their own special bubble that don't really get to be compared to anything else. And who knows if I'll feel that way. Hopefully, knock on wood, I make another team in 4 years. But maybe I'll feel differently then. I don't think I will. I just think, yeah, that experience like has its own metric for everything. And I sort of keep that separate. And maybe I shouldn't, but I think most people do, and I think most athletes do. And honestly, most spectators seem to as well. Like, people watch the Olympics that don't watch anything else. Not saying that's a good thing, necessarily, but it's the world we live in, and it's the sort of space that the Olympics occupies in our cultural imagination. The other two, though, I guess... I mean, at both of them, I ran well. So it's not as if the times or the results were meaningless. They definitely played a role. But I think, for me, like, what makes a race or a competition experience memorable is often what's happening around and outside of the track. Like, Penn, I got to be there with people that I'm really, really good friends with off the track. And that's so special. Like, getting to hug those girls at the finish line it's unreal, you know? Chloe, one of my teammates, like, Chloe and I have known each other since we were 18. And so to have that as my senior year, like, to have that 4 years later it really is amazing. And then Glasgow just was something I had never imagined myself doing, at that point in the year. I live really far from home. I I grew up going home to race and being around New Zealand athletes, but I often feel very far from that place geographically. And so to feel that connected to a place by wearing its name on your chest, like there's something quite intense and real about that. Yeah. Sorry, that was like quite rambling.
No, that's so good. My whole intent of that question as I phrased it was getting a deeper look in your head, and you shared that look. So I appreciate that. There's a quote I came across last month, mid-October, that I love. And I think it's one of the most true sayings I've ever come across. And I had all these feelings over the past few years in terms of like thinking back to my high school days and just different moments in my life or special experiences. I feel like this quote really encapsulated the way I was feeling. The quote is, "The good old days are nothing more than the present moment being taken for granted."
Mm.
Do you feel like you were able to fully appreciate those moments in college? Or do you wish you would have appreciated them more? And if so, what would be some advice to those out there in those moments to appreciate them more?
I don't know. I don't even know if I'm removed enough from them yet to be able
Yeah.
to answer that question fully. I think something I'm pretty grateful for both of those things is that I had people telling me to stop and appreciate those moments. Gibby, like my college coach, did a great job. He was able to come to Glasgow, which was huge and very important to me. And then at Penn. And yeah, I think that luckily I had enough people saying like, this is really important and you're going to remember this moment. And more so than even that, saying slow down. Like, don't worry about what's next right now. Just be in this moment. Like the day after Glasgow, Gibby and I went to the University of Glasgow or the day after the heats. In between the heats and the finals, we just walked around the university in Glasgow. And he sent me a text afterwards. My mom was there too, my grandma in Glasgow, which was very, very special. But Gibby sent me a text being like, let's do this again at the University of Paris. I don't think Paris has a university called the University of Paris. I don't know. The point was, it was like, we had this incredible couple of days in Scotland. There's room for more. Don't worry about it yet. Like, we had a great time. And I'm not really communicating the chronology of this very well, but I think it's important to have those people that can see the bigger picture when you can't. And it's very hard to see the bigger picture when you're the main, like when you're the protagonist in your own story, as everyone is, right? We're all the like main characters in our own worlds, in our own heads. So it is important to have people that can convey the magnitude of a moment for you, but also see where it's going.
So good. Such good thoughts there. Bringing us back to present day here. You mentioned a minute ago, you're kind of in the freshman, like you view yourself as a freshman. That's a joke you've been sharing. What's your mindset going into this new year? We're in November. I'm sure you're in the thick of fall training and long runs and tempo runs and hills and all that fun stuff. Maybe hills and 200s if Dathan hasn't given you that yet.
Next week is my first one, actually.
There you go. Yeah, what's your perspective? Where's your mindset at going into this freshman year?
I think I'm just feeling right now like a lot of gratitude. I knew this was the right fit for me a long time ago when I first started the process of figuring out what was next. But of course you never know, and it's like a college visit. Like you think you've made the right choice, and then for a lot of people it ends up not being the right choice, or like it's not what they expected. And if you're lucky, it is. And I just have been feeling very validated in my decision the last couple of weeks since we've been here. I think my new coaches and my new teammates are just so knowledgeable and so experienced, and also very willing to share. Like they are so supportive. I think I said earlier, I ask questions that sometimes seem dumb. No one has ever made out like one of my questions sounds dumb. They've just answered. And it's even stuff like, I would say I'm doing a lot of speed development work now, which is new for me. And I'm not necessarily the best at the mobility drills. Let's just put it that way. In fact, I'm really bad. I have no mobility. And it takes me a little while, and, everyone laughs at me. And then people are like, wow, Maia, like, you look better than last week. And I think that is, in a nutshell, has been my experience on this team so far. Like, people are willing to have a good time. Of course, they're going to make fun of you in a really happy and positive sense. And then they're going to say, you're doing good. Keep going. And that's just, yeah, I feel so lucky to be here and be with these people. And I'm just trying to learn as much as I can from everyone right now.
So good. One final serious question for you, Maia. What would be and you can take this whatever direction you want to go in. We've covered all sorts of bases today, all sorts of different deep rabbit holes and avenues. So what is ever on your heart and mind, share it with the people. What's the final takeaway message that you want to leave with them today?
Oh, wow. That's a big one to just throw in at the end. Oh, let me think about it for a second.
Or like those who have listened to this conversation, what's the final cherry on top message that you want to leave them with going out of this conversation as they put their AirPods back in their case or finish up their run?
I think just that you have time. I feel like randomly it's just been a lot about my parents, but that's something my dad said, and then proceeded to tell like some random stories about his uni friends who like thought they were going to go in one career path and ended up somewhere else. But it's true. Like I'm saying this first of all as how old am I? 22-year-old. I'm saying this as a 22-year-old. So like really this means nothing coming from my mouth, but your career is not built in a day, but your life can also change in a day. And I think it's just one of those things, like, don't rush, keep doing what you're doing. And things can change so quickly in ways that you literally cannot imagine right now. So yeah, just take it day by day. You have time.
Maia, final question for you. We're in November, holiday season. What's your favorite holiday and why? And what are some of your favorite things about that holiday?
My favorite holiday? I can tell you what it's not. It's not New Year's. Okay. I don't like New Year's. Like
it's I've funny, had some. I don't even think that as a holiday, but it is a holiday. It's definitely a holiday.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some fun New Year's, but I think it's like a lot of pressure and expectation for a day that really just rolls around. Yeah. Well, we just had Halloween, and I love Halloween because I love dressing up. And I love thinking of a costume. So Halloween's probably pretty high up there for me.
You're also on a team that like does Halloween to the night. Like they live it up. Halloween is a big thing for that team.
Yeah, it was my first time like handing out candy to trick-or-treaters too, so that was pretty fun on the night of. And I already have a Pinterest board for next year's Halloween. So yeah.
Wow, you really like how? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no.
That is a very
specifically, I like costumes.
What's the best over the years, if you had to say?
Of my own Halloween costume?
Yes, of your own. Like, what's the best Halloween costume edition you've come up with?
Okay, so last year, my roommates and I did Princess Diana. Like, one of them was Nicki Minaj, and one was Ice Spice, and then I was, like, Princess Diana, like, the British royal Diana. The night ended up being a flop, if I'm honest, but the costume was a great idea. And one year it was a rain cloud. That was pretty good. I had an umbrella with, like, stuffing, like, sewing stuffing, hot glue gunned on top, and then this long, sparkly, silvery blue dress. I was pretty pleased with that one.
Speaking of Princess Diana, we'll end on this fun fact that the listeners do not know about me because I don't think I've ever publicly shared it. My grandma, through her lineage, is somehow connected to someone who's in the line of the throne or like in royal family. So, and I don't know if they're still alive. So the joke growing up that I'd always ask my mom is like, how many people would have to die for me to be the King of England, despite having like no. So yeah, that's a fun fact about me.
Fact.
Yeah, I forget. It's like some cousin in the royal family. That's definitely not how royal lineage works. Like if 100 people died, I'm not.
Second cousin twice removed.
Yeah, no, she was definitely within it. Like if I saw a tree, she's for sure on the tree if you looked it up on Google. But again, it's like my grandma's somewhat related to her. I forget. Bottom line, I'm never going to be the King of England. I'll stick with the podcasting thing, but I just thought of it when we were talking about Princess Diana. So, but anyways,
That's
Maya,
a
on
fun
that,
fact.
yeah, it is a fun fact. On that fun note, thank you so much for this really introspective, reflective, inspirational conversation. You always bring such stellar thoughts to the table. And I'm always grateful to you for them because I personally grow from them. And these are the type of conversations that I would have needed and wanted back in the day. So, and probably still need and want. And that's why I seek them out and have them. So thank you so much for not being a cookie cutter athlete and being willing to go deep in on your career and all the fun stuff. Just appreciate you. And thank you for another stellar round 3. Appreciate it a ton.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Dominic.